Our next presenter is Matthew Kronberg, who is with Food Waste, who's here to give us a presentation on food waste and industry perspective. In 2019, Matthew co-founded Grainstone to help address food waste and revolutionise the cereal value chain, starting with barley-derived brewers' spent grain. The pioneering company has worked in collaboration with Australia's best researchers on its mission. As an award-winning certified B Corporation, impact and rethinking global systems towards a circular economy to serve people better is at Grainstone's core. And you may recognise Matthew from the short video that was played at the beginning of this session. So please join me in welcoming Matthew.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we meet. So I'd like to mix it up a bit. We've heard lots of numbers today. I'd like to tell you a bit of a story about hope, a bit of my founder story, and some of my startup learnings from Grainstone that hopefully may inspire some of you budding entrepreneurs out there, some of you impact folks on this journey as we're helping to make the world a better place. You know, I want to start this journey talking about country, Australia. It is the wide brown land for me. About 100 years ago, let's flash back. My great-grandfather returned from the front lines in France, and he was given a piece of land by the government as a thanks, if you may, for his contribution to fighting for freedom and justice. He had the mental and physical scars, but despite that, that piece of land gave him hope, a starting point. New to farming, he followed the advice of others, clear felling the land, slashing, burning. It was the way it was done back then. You know, land was seen as an abundant resource, nature, a resource to be conquered, controlled. He started in a bark hut, rustic, but it was a foundation, a safe place to call home. Week after week, month after month, he toiled. The seasons turned, as they do, the years passed, things start to go exponential. And then in the blink of the eye, here we are today. It's that quick. 100 years is both a long time and a short time. What is the legacy we want to leave for our kids? For their kids, for our great-grandkids? Meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's sustainable development. What is the world we want to create? So some more about my sort of founder story. About a decade, or well over a decade ago now, I was a young aerospace graduate working in the management structure of one of Australia's major airlines. It struck me as odd that the airline industry as a whole wasn't doing much about climate change. I couldn't really get it. I boldly wrote an email to the Chief Risk Officer and proposed he be my mentor, help me understand this amongst all the other words of wisdom that he could provide. Over our coffees, I came to learn that he completely agreed, but was risk-averse to being seen as pushing too hard on the matter, as he felt that the bean counters would always push back on him. They were not ready to accept the science. He knew there was a problem in this area, but he didn't know how to solve it. Kicking the can down the street seemed to be the safer career option. But he wanted to quietly build momentum. So being the flexible young grad that I effectively was, he appointed me as the first climate change analyst and asked me to look at all the risks and all of the opportunities that could occur in this area. I took the plunge. Over the following years, I worked hard with a small team that undertook a series of, for that time, ambitious and courageous initiatives that helped the airline to improve its sustainability performance compared to others. And in doing so, driving initiatives that helped to reduce costs, raise risks up to the board level, and improve the environmental performance, ultimately winning the airline Eco Aviation Airline of the Year. But I could see as a problem. As fast as we were moving things forwards, I couldn't see any clear technology opportunities that could really solve the problem, even a portfolio of solutions. The airline industry was simply growing faster than the efficiency gains. It was just an unachievable solution. So I recognised it was time to move on, chasing hope. Whilst at the airline, I'd worked a bit on government climate strategy, climate policy, amongst other things, which opened the door for me to work with the United Nations system, including being in Paris for the exciting 2 weeks leading up to COP21 that culminated in the signing of the Paris Agreement. Less than a year later, we saw the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, to those that are new to this, I must always emphasise that these aren't dull, legally binding international treaties that we should leave government to implement. Rather, these are instruments of hope, a uniting common purpose, globally, a light on the hill that helps us to look beyond the hustle and bustle of our daily lives. A few years after that, feeling as a bit of a comparatively small cog in the wheel, desperately trying to drive things forwards against the bureaucracy that is that organisation, I feel I'd done what I could do in the job. You know, a ship is safest in the harbour, but that's not what ships are designed to do. It was time to move on, chasing hope. Weighing up my options, I decided to try and help build something tangible, on the ground, real, in my home country, Australia. I decided to take the leap and try to build an impact startup. You know, if not you, who? If not now, when? I know a lot of the people in this room probably ask that themselves. So another thing I'd done in my airline days was to do a bit of a landscape review of all of the biomass streams, all the food waste streams that are produced in Australia, and look primarily at what could be converted into jet fuel. In that work, I discovered there's a huge number that can be converted into much more valuable things than jet fuel, in line with the food waste hierarchy. One that I found particularly interesting and compelling was brewers' spent grain, a consistent year-round byproduct stream from brewing, massive in volume, about 45 million tonnes globally, 300,000 tonnes of it produced in Australia. It was a big problem in need of a solution. So I had a series of extensive validation conversations with industry stakeholders and made some market-based observations about the problem. You know, breweries were focused on what they were doing best at, which is making beer. Non-core aspects, such as solving their food waste, was just off their radar, off their investment radar, and would require early-stage development of technology that they just didn't have the interest or capability to do alone. I mean, brewing beer is a pretty cutthroat industry, like all of these. There's around 650 brewers in Australia. So I couldn't really fault them for not wanting to take that investment step for the early stage risk that was involved. Now, I also discovered they didn't want to see their waste data getting shared with other breweries or even the government, which resulted in a conclusion that it was clear they needed an independent third party, a startup to work as a mechanism to help aggregate the grain together to achieve minimum viable scales of economy, attract that higher risk, higher return capital to the problem, and upcycle the feedstock. I also wanted to make sure that the solution was for the entire spent grain waste stream as best as possible, not just a solution for a single major, super major, sort of a rich brewery. Grainstone was born. First, we developed our higher protein specialty flour to pioneer the way for upcycling this food waste stream back into the food system and show that we could get a product to market from lab to the commercial world, and importantly, safely. It is a food waste stream, so that's top of mind for a lot of people. The food waste CRC, or N-Food Waste, as we now call it, provided our first matching grant that I put with my bootstrap own money to start developing elements of our multi-product biorefining technology with the support of the Queensland University of Technology. This was catalytic. We then took this prototype fractionation technology to CSIRO Innovation to work with scaling it up to a pilot. And with the support of their Kickstart grant funding, we're able to further progress this. In our journey, it's been critical, the non-dilutive grant funding that we've had to enable us to move forwards and remain investable. We initially tried to develop a co-op model with other breweries on the East Coast, but found that unfortunately they weren't too keen on working that closely together when it came putting pen to paper, which would have brought them natural competitive advantages, but I, again, understand that, so we had to raise private investment. Now, I reckon we have, in fact, I'll skip that part in the interest of time. So, on a related note, we went through a fairly stringent process to get B Corp certified, as we see this is very important to help validate our impact and our impact model and activities. It permanently bakes a clause into our company constitution that helps to build a more sustainability and ethical thinking from the top. If every company in the world was required to be a B Corp, I think this would enable us to throw a whole bunch of environmental and social regulation that's quite prescriptive into the bin. It would materially improve culture and governance. Good corporate citizenship would be a bit more of a norm. Expanding that idea, we could involve council rate reduction or tax discounts for B Corps that could help attract, incentivise and accelerate turning the dial. But I digress. So with our view that Brewer Spent Grain is largely a system inefficiency that can be solved by deploying our technology globally, we've started to look upstream to what we can do to make a difference in the incumbent barley value chain, all the way back to the farm. Which brings us to the conclusion. The unconscious slash and burn consumption is the old way of doing things. There's not much, or very few apples left, low-hanging fruit on that tree. Big growth opportunities exist in the circular economy, including food waste transformation. The future is not disposable. So let's keep building on the amazing momentum and create more hope. Many people are trying hard where they can. For everyone else, we don't have another 100 years to wait.
You can have a seat.